So in this season, actually, we are going to talk about the save selection and search set. So in Navisworks, actually, if you go on sets, for example, you will have a kind of window in the name of manage sets that if you click on it, you will have a kind of window like this. Let me pin it in here that you can see it and better and nice. So in the set window here, you can actually have save selection and save search, and we can manage them. Yes. In fact, actually, it's really one of the important part of Navisworks that it includes, for example, these two options. By helping of save selection, actually, we will be able to go for the elements that we have selected. For example, let's assume that I will select them. So because we want to select them in future really faster or hide or show them, for example, we can save them, that we don't, for example, select them again. It's enough that it suffices you click on this icon that by default it will accept it. But save search is really similar to this save selection, just it has a difference that instead of, for example, selected items, that it saves them, for example, based on the actually criterion. For example, the conditions of the searching, it will search for them. For example, in window of find items, that we will, for example, based on some conditions, you will find some items. For example, let me go on property windows. For example, let me click on one of these tools in items. For example, elements. So based on Gridier, for example, let me click on create search. For example, let me add it in here. We've talked about that before. So if you click on it, all of those beams that this condition is on them will be selected. So we can actually use save search in here. So save selection, actually the selected elements will be saved and keep them. I will keep them, for example, but save search based on the, for example, features and criterion that we have just define, for example, for the elements or conditions that you've set for the elements, it will just find them. So we'll use both of them. But the main difference between them actually is a save selection actually is constant. That if you've selected something before, just those ones will be included, and for the repetitive actions that we are going to show or hide or, for example, transfer or change the colors, it will be used for them. But actually a search set actually is active. It means that, for example, it will be able to be updated automatically. The time that, for example, we're using save selection, if, for example, in the model in Revit, for example, the elements that we have similar to them, they will be added, it doesn't affect on it. If we need it, we have to add the item to that. But when we are using a save search, for example, in here in Revit Structure or in any other softwares, for example, you've done the model and in the Navisworks, it got updated. If the new items with the conditions that we have created automatically, it could be added or, for example, deleted. Smart, very smart, it could happen, for example. So because of that, if you want actually to categorize your models based on the criteria, for example, it's better you use the save search, but for example, for some simple actions, or for example, like hiding, I don't know, transparency, changing the color, showing, hiding, everything that you want, you can use the save selection. Both of them will be used, but the save search is really more professional and more technical. So the time that you use, for example, save, for example, in here, it will be added in here in sets. For example, in Clash Detective, they will be added in here. I will talk about them, of course. In Timeliner, it could be used, and many other places that we need, of course, we can use save search and save selections in here. So actually, about the appearance, the time, for example, that you create a kind of save selection, the icon will be circle and a square inside it. You see the icon is like this, but actually the time that you're using save search in here, you will have a kind of camera that is about the searching, for example, and we have a box on it that it shows exactly the object. So these are the shapes and of the icons of them. That is completely clear. This is circle, and we have a kind of square in it. It means that you've selected some elements. The thing that we have a camera and we have a kind of square on it, it means that by kind of, for example, something you've searched for some element. So by these icons, you can really understand that which one is save selection, you've selected that, or for example, which one has got searched and then they've got saved. So both of them have the we are able to have command for them, for example, or for example hide them, or even you can right click on it and you can just add command to them. Or if for example you click on it, it will tell you that which elements or where the elements are. This is a kind of really brief explanation about the similarity and differences in the structure of save selection and save search, for example. If we are going to talk about the details of them, before we want to just tell you about the making of them or creating of them, we have a kind of table that we want to have a kind of comparison about the selection sets and search sets, for example. In here, it's really helpful to you. The first option that we have in here is about the type of the group that we have in here. Selection sets, they are statics. Yeah, they are if for example new items will be added or deleted, nothing will happen to them. But search sets, they are active based on the condition, or for example the searching that has happened. For example, the new items will be included in them. Model dependency. Actually, the changings that will be happen in the model, they actually don't depend on, for example, the selection sets, or for example even names or types of the conditions. But search sets completely depend on actually the model, and all of the changings will happen on them. So actually storage method, selection sets actually based on the items, selected items of course, will be created and saved. But actually search sets or save search, for example, based on the details, like for example similar length, similar types, system classifications, and for example, or each of the properties, for example, that you have, you want to just consider as a kind of I don't know, criteria for searching, it will happen for them. If you want to have a kind of example use case, for example, in here, for example, all of the walls that they are existing in the first floor, for example, you can just select them. You want to change the color, height, show transparent, you can do it. But for search sets, actually this option is completely active, that it could be like this, that all of the columns that for example have more than 3 meter height, for example, they are steel, or all of the walls, for example, that they don't have more than 4 meter length, they are for example concrete. So very easily based on some criteria, for example, they could be found. So the group creation time, for example, a selection set, actually the time that you click on that item, they will be activated and they are usable. Search set is the time, for example, that you're using, for example, find items or new versions. For example, you're using the properties in new versions, you can activate it. So about the flexibility, for example, selection sets is related to the selected elements, but search sets, for example, it has really higher flexibility, and all of those elements that, for example, you're matched by, for example, that searching, it will be included. The next one is reusability. For example, if you want to consider that, actually selection sets, actually just in the current model, it will be usable. But search sets, it will be used, for example, in other projects in future too. The next one is export capability. Selection sets actually couldn't be exported. I mean, you cannot use it in other projects. Otherwise, you have exactly the NWF or NWD and you use them. But say search sets, for example, they could be exported as an XML, and for example, you can use it in other projects, and a lot of time will be saved. It's really perfect. The next one is item highlighting. In here, for example, in for example work environment, each of these ones that will be selected in actually work, you can see those elements. The search power and speed, actually, if you want to consider them for selection sets, they are really useful for example selected items, and it's really limited. But search sets, it has really higher flexibility, and it's really for more complicated models and activate models that you can find them. So the next one, which is renaming and comments, yes, that we can consider for the for both of them, selection sets, search sets. For example, we can have comments and names. The next one is CAD file dependency. For example, in selection sets, actually that actually dependency is not existing. It doesn't affect on it if, for example, it happens, but search sets is completely it has dependency, so it can happen. The next one is display in sets panel. So both of them actually could be seen in, for example, panel sets with the different icons that we have. Selection set, it has like in the circle, and inside it we have a square. I mean the elements that have been selected, but search set, it has a kind of camera that it has to kind of resemble object, and by searching we found it. And best use case, for example, in here, the selection sets for constant models that we don't want to save them, but search sets, for example, for the active actually models that really they are getting updated all in all, for example, and we want to add everything or delete everything that we want here. So this is a kind of, for example, explanation about the safe selection and safe search, for example, be really important and useful and practical that we'll talk about them, that how we can create them.